Today I'm launching a new series called 4K Takeaways, where I'll be offering my take, my views on new catalog 4K Blu-ray releases. So to kick things off today, I'll be discussing new 4Ks of Southern Comfort, The Last Castle, Darkman, and Footloose. So let's rock this. Hi everyone, how you doing? I'm Fuzz. Welcome to the inaugural installment of my new 4K mini review series that I'm calling 4K Takeaways. This is a series where I'll be exploring and offering my take on recent 4K Blu-ray releases that have captured my interest, at least enough for me to purchase them for my own collection. Now keep in mind, these are not intended to be in-depth or highly detailed, highly technical, professional 4K reviews. That's not really what I'm doing here. Instead, I'm kind of taking a more generalized, almost like a layman's approach to these mini reviews and just offering my overall readout, my general impression of any given new 4K release for those who are interested in hearing what I think about the title. And for those of you who are regular viewers of this channel, these mini reviews are going to be a little bit more structured, organized, and substantive than the more off-the-cuff way I usually talk about movies in my list videos. Now, for reference here, keep in mind I'm just an average collector here with a modest setup. I'm not working with an elaborate high-end home theater system or anything like that. I watch my 4K movies on a 75-inch Samsung 4K TV, and then I also have a traditional 5.1 surround sound system. So no Dolby Vision for me and no Dolby Atmos. And as such, when I speak of HDR or the wider color gamut, it will be in more general terms. And I'm also not one to focus on audio very much when it comes to movies, meaning film audio options are not the kind of thing that can make or break a decision for me to pick up a release. I'm just not very critical with the audio when I'm watching a movie or assessing a particular release. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like it to sound good, of course, and if Atmos or DTS:X mixes are available, then yeah, great, I'm all in on those. But overall, I don't usually place a whole lot of weight on the audio when I'm watching a movie, and I'm usually satisfied with whatever audio options are included with the release. I mean, a lot of times I'm usually watching movies late at night after my family has gone to bed, and I'm using my trusty Beats Studio Pro headphones here. And I think these are great headphones, by the way, for movies. They're nice and beefy and have a rich tone, and these actually provide for a wonderfully immersive experience. It's just a different kind of immersion than you'd get if you have a bunch of live speakers all over the room with height channels and whatnot. Now, I know I'm assuming that those of you who are big-time home theater enthusiasts are probably cringing right about now, and I get it. That's cool. Go ahead and cringe away. I just go with what works best for me and my life and my preferences. I'll probably eventually upgrade to a Dolby Atmos setup at some point. It is something I've thought about down the line, but it's not a huge priority for me right now. That's probably at least a few years away before I think about doing something like that. So just understand my discussion of the audio aspects of these releases is going to be kept to a minimum, right? I'm not going to get into an in-depth discussion of what I think of the audio because I don't really feel like I have the equipment to properly evaluate it, especially if we're getting into like Dolby Atmos tracks or whatnot. Okay, so with all that in mind, let me lay out quickly how these mini reviews are going to work so you guys will know what to expect moving forward. For each film, I'll briefly introduce the title, and then the takeaway is going to have four key elements to it. The image presentation and audio, the special features, the packaging, and then finally I'll have an overall score at the end and kind of give you a brief little breakdown of how I arrived at that score. So with all that in mind, I'm going to get into today's titles here in just a second. But first off, I've got a new Fuzz Club member here I want to give a shout out to real quick. Neppons, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Neppons just became a member of the Fuzz Club, the newest member of the Fuzz Club. Neppons, thank you so much for your support. I really, really appreciate that. And I look forward to chatting with you more in comments and chat and whatnot moving forward. And if any of you would like to know more about the Fuzz Club, there's a link in the description, or you can just click the join button below and it'll bring up all the membership information. Okay, so let's get right into these takeaways. The first film I want to talk about is from 1981, directed by Walter Hill, and that is Southern Comfort from Vinegar Syndrome. Of course, I have the nice VSU box here, which I will talk about here more in a minute. This is a great film, a great backwoods survival type story along the lines of Deliverance, but not exactly the same. It's got a great cast with Keith Carradine, Powers Booth, and Fred Ward all turning in solid performances. Now, I don't usually like to say too much about the plot of a movie when I'm doing these kinds of things, other than to maybe just set up a basic, premise, the foundation for the film or whatnot. But this really was an entertaining film. I very much enjoyed this one, and I think this may now actually be pretty high up on my own personal list of favorite Walter Hill films, certainly right up there with The Warriors and The Driver for me personally. And if you're a fan of Walter Hill movies, I would absolutely recommend this one. So let's get into some of the other details here. This is a Vinegar Syndrome 4K and Blu-ray combo set. It's a new restoration that is sourced from a 4K scan of the film's 35mm preservation interpositive. Apparently, the original camera negative is lost. They could not find it, so the interpositive was the best available source that they had to work with. So because it's sourced from an interpositive, you do get a slight loss of quality. It's not quite as sharp as it could be if we had an original camera negative available, but it still looks really good. Now, there's no Dolby Vision on this release. Vinegar Syndrome, I don't think usually does Dolby Vision. They mainly stick with HDR10. So this is HDR10. The aspect ratio is framed at 1.85 to 1. Fills up most of a 16:9 screen. For those who are not familiar with aspect ratio, 1.85 to 1 will fill up most of your screen with a slight little margin on the top or bottom. Now, I would say this image has a very cinematic and filmic appearance, but there is a pretty heavy grain presence or grain structure for those of you who are not big fans of grain. It's not something I personally have a problem with because I know that grain is just a natural part of the film's image. But if you're not a fan of grain at all, there's a strong chance you could have an issue with this release. Though there is also a Blu-ray disc included with this release, so some may actually prefer to watch the Blu-ray version to cut down on the grain factor. Because 4K is a higher resolution format, you tend to see more of the film's natural grain on 4K. Blu-ray, not as high a resolution, so the grain is not quite as present as it appears when you're watching a 4K disc. And the heavier grain presence actually speaks to Vinegar Syndrome's approach to film restoration and film preservation in general. Vinegar Syndrome does try to stay true to the source, faithful to the filmmaker's original vision and intent. I suspect from Vinegar Syndrome's perspective, they are in the film preservation business. They are not in the film revision business. So you don't usually see Vinegar Syndrome scrubbing away all the grain with digital noise reduction or whatnot. When Vinegar Syndrome restores a film, they focus on repairing any damage to the film or cleaning up any debris or whatnot. And then, of course, the color timing as well. I mean, those are the kinds of things that they do. But what they don't do is go and apply a bunch of digital noise reduction. They don't try to get rid of all the grain or anything like that. They aim to make the final product look as faithful to the original source, as faithful to the director's intent as possible. They really don't screw with the films too much. They clean it up, they do an HDR pass, they make it look real nice, but they leave the natural grain intact. So because they don't go in and scrub all the grain away, that means in the case of this film, we're getting some great detail with skin and facial features or the textures of clothing, like their uniforms that they're wearing or whatnot. Again, not as good as it would be if we had the original camera negative to work with, but this looks great in terms of the amount of detail that you get. So all that said, I think the film looks great if you can handle the grain. And remember, it's intended to be a very gritty film, right? It's intended to be, and that's kind of how Walter Hill operates in general, right? A lot of his films have kind of a gritty look to them, but it's intended to be a very gritty, dreary looking film by design. Not exactly the widest color spectrum here, right? You're dealing with a lot of overcast skies, a lot of gray. You got a lot of browns and greens from the swamplands that they're trampling around in. But the image still has a lot of depth to it. So what colors we do get still have a nice little bit of subtle pop to them. Now, I had never seen this film before prior to picking this up, so I didn't really have anything to compare it to in terms of previous releases. I know there was a Shout Factory release. I think it was from 2014. They put it out on Blu-ray. This is the first time it's ever been released on 4K. But I didn't really have a whole lot to compare this to, you know, having never seen the film before. I'm just assuming that this set is probably about the best the film has ever looked on home media. I can't totally confirm that myself firsthand, but that's my guess. This is probably about the best it's ever looked on home media. And from some of the other reviews I've been reading, it seems to be other people tend to agree with that. As for audio, you get an English 2.0 mono DTS HD master. And when I watched the film, I used my Beats Studio headphones that I was talking about, which again, I often use for films when I'm watching them later at night or whatnot. But I thought it sounded decent. The audio I thought sounded fine. It sounded fairly full, all things considered. Considering it's a mono track, I thought it actually sounded pretty decent and packed a punch when it needed to. So really no complaints about the audio, but usually I'm not someone who is going to complain about audio. You know, I'm usually, like I said, happy with whatever audio options they give us. As long as it doesn't sound like totally horrible and egregious, usually I'm pretty easy to please when it comes to audio. Moving on next to the special features for this film. For me personally, the most notable special feature here is a 27-minute making of documentary or retrospective doc. It's listed as an archival featurette, but it's the same retrospective that appeared in that 2014 Shout Factory Blu-ray that came out. So it is HD, and which I very much appreciate. Now, there's also some other interviews in there on the special features. You do have a new Walter Hill interview. But personally, when it comes to special features, I'm not someone who likes to spend a lot of time going through a bunch of standalone interviews. You know, I actually prefer it when they put together some kind of retrospective or making of documentary that, you know, brings interview clips from different sources and kind of compiles it all together in a nice little presentation. That's what I want to see in special features. I'm usually not someone who's all that interested in commentary tracks, and I'm usually not interested in, like I said, standalone interviews, right? I like making of documentaries. So when I'm talking about special features, that's the kind of thing I'm going to zero in on. Those are the kinds of things that I'm going to be looking for the most in terms of what interests me personally the most. And that's what I loved about Southern Comfort. Even if it's only a half-hour making of documentary, you'd be surprised at how much you can actually pack into a 30-minute documentary. You know, 30 minutes doesn't sound like a whole lot when you're talking about like a making of, but that's actually longer than it seems. You know, again, it just depends on how it's done, but sometimes you can get quite a bit from a 30-minute documentary. It can actually be fairly satisfying, and you can actually feel like you got what you wanted to see out of that documentary. So, but yeah, so decent special features, nothing crazy, but the documentary was really the big thing that I liked the most about the special features here. Okay, and of course we have to talk about Vinegar Syndrome's awesome packaging for this release. This comes in one of their VSU boxes, which stands for Vinegar Syndrome Ultra. You can only get these box sets from Vinegar Syndrome's website. You're not going to find this type of release on Amazon. You'll just get a standard Amaray case version on Amazon. But yeah, I love their VSU boxes. You get this nice rigid hard box, or also known as the chunky box, which looks very cool. You got, you know, some spot gloss on the lettering there, which I think you can see kind of better there on the spine. And then, of course, just some really great art. And I will say the colors in hand, the colors here actually look more vibrant and more striking than if you're looking at it through the video. Once you have it in hand, I was surprised at how cool this actually looks once I actually got it, right? So, so let's open this up here. We got, again, the magnetic latch there. And then you open it up, you have a ribbon there that helps you to pull everything out. And I will set this down and go bit by bit there. You do get one of Vinegar Syndrome's nice slip covers. They're nice, thick slip covers that are awesome. That's the front. There's the back. Okay, and then, of course, just the standard Amaray case inside. The Amaray case does have reversible cover art. On the other side of this is just the same art as on the exterior of the box. Now, if you were to buy this from Amazon, this is what you'd get. You wouldn't get a slipcover, you wouldn't get the nice box set or anything like that. You just get this Amaray case. So if you happen to see it on Amazon, understand that this is what you would be getting if you were to buy it from them. Of course, you can only buy the VSU box sets from Vinegar Syndrome or a couple select like indie retailers like Orbit DVD, but it's mainly if you want the box set, the nice box set version, you've got to get it through Vinegar Syndrome, and I'll show you the rest here. The box set also comes with a nice little book there, about a 30-40 page book, I'm guessing, and then of course you've got some nice art on the inside there. Show you the back cover there. So very cool stuff. Yeah, I'm a real big fan of this line from Vinegar Syndrome. It's one of my favorite types of packaging out there. Oh, there is one other thing I think I wanted to show you here. I showed you the book, but there's actually two books that come with this release. The other one is included in the Amaray case, and this is a smaller like booklet, right? But it's about 20 pages, I think. But you also get this booklet, which is different than the other booklet. It has, I believe, different essays and different photos. So yeah, it's kind of a nice little thing. Of course, you get, like I said, 2 discs. You get a 4K disc and a Blu-ray disc. So yeah, the packaging on this is awesome. I absolutely love these VSU boxes. So yeah, when I found out that a Walter Hill film that I was in the market for was coming out in a VSU version, I was pretty excited about that because, I know the kind of quality that Vinegar Syndrome puts out with these releases. So yeah, good stuff. Okay, so let's get into my rating for this, my scoring. My overall score for this release is going to be an 8 out of 10. And let me briefly break that down for you. I give the packaging a 9 out of 10, and I give the image, the film, and the features a 7 out of 10. So between those, it works out to be, in my mind, about an 8 out of 10. So just a great release all the way around, and one I would highly recommend if you are a fan of Walter Hill's films, or if this just sounds like something that might be your cup of tea. Okay, let's move on to the next 4K takeaway here. The next film I wanted to talk about is a Robert Redford film, a Kino Lorber release, The Last Castle. This is a great prison film from 2001, kind of a military prison. Robert Redford plays a legendary, highly decorated army general who is court-martialed and sentenced to like 10 years in this prison for disgraced military members. And the prison here has some issues, right? Most notably with a corrupt, kind of sinister warden played by James Gandolfini, who I think always does a great job, or always did do a great job playing assholes while he was alive. That was, I think, one of James Gandolfini's strong suits. Yeah, he plays a great bad guy, doesn't he? And this is apparently loosely based on a true story. It also stars Delroy Lindo and Mark Ruffalo. I think it's a very underrated and thought-provoking film. It didn't do very well at the box office. In fact, I think it bombed, right? I think it lost money at the box office. So because of that, I think this film was kind of under the radar for a lot of people. But if you like prison films, it's definitely one that is at least worth a watch. Of course, I liked it enough to want to own it, but I'm a huge Robert Redford fan. I've always been a big Redford fan, and while this may not be his best film, it's absolutely a decent, entertaining movie that I think any Redford fan would appreciate. So talking about image quality and presentation, this is a new master, a new HDR master, sourced from a 4K scan of the original camera negative. You do get both HDR10 and Dolby Vision here, and the aspect ratio is at 2.40 to 1. Overall, I think this is a great looking image that again, looks true to the source, right? It looks the way that I personally remember the film looking, except better. And I hadn't seen the film in quite a while. But of course, it's a higher resolution than the last time I saw the film, so it's of course going to look a little better. I mean, it's probably been about 15, 20 years since I've seen this film, and yeah, this definitely looks the way I remembered it looking. The image has a lot of depth and presence to it, but just keep in mind, it's not necessarily a very colorful film, so it may not feel like it has as much pop to it as other 4Ks in your collection. It's a very gray movie, somewhat like Southern Comfort is, except in a different way. It's a very gray movie, almost to the point where it's somewhat of a monochrome appearance, you know, not quite that drastic, but it's in a prison with a lot of concrete and cement, bricks. You do get some occasional splashes of color in some browns and some greens, and occasionally you'll see a little bit of orange. But overall, the film doesn't feel like it has a very wide color spectrum, right? And that's just the way the film looks, right? That was by design. Now, I would not call this a mind-blowing 4K image just due to the nature of the film and the colors being used. It's not the kind of film that you would want to use to demo out your 4K system, your home theater system, for someone else. But it is still a very competent and solid restoration. The 4K here looks great for the type of film that it is. You definitely get a good amount of detail and texture and skin and hair and facial features, the rocks in the prison yard, the prison uniforms that they're wearing, you know, the military clothing and whatnot. There's actually a lot of good detail there to witness. And the image here, despite not being the most colorful, is still quite vibrant and striking for the type of aesthetic that they were going for here, the type of aesthetic that this film has overall. But I was not disappointed with the image on this. I never saw the previous Paramount Blu-ray that I think they released in 2021, but I'm guessing this Kino 4K is probably the best this film has ever looked, and it's probably the best this film can look, considering the nature of the film. As far as the audio is concerned, you get a 5.1 DTS HD master and a 2.0 DTS HD master. So yeah, you get stereo and surround. You know, that's good enough for me. You know, I can't really comment much on the audio here. Again, I was watching this with headphones on, and I mean, the audio sounded fine for what it was, but there was nothing that really stood out about it one way or another, negative or positive, about the audio on this. But so yeah. Now, moving on to special features, I gotta say this probably has the weakest bonus features of the bunch that I'm talking about today, and that shouldn't be a surprise to us, right? Because Kino Lorber isn't always the best company when it comes to delivering on the bonus features, are they? Oftentimes, Kino just carries over whatever existing studio promo featurettes they've been given access to, and that's what they just kind of dump on their discs. But from what I've seen, you don't usually get a whole lot of new special features with most Kino Lorber releases on 4K. I just don't think bonus features is Kino's strong suit. You know, they're great with restorations and with the sheer number of titles that they have out there. But yeah, special features, that's not something that they're known for, having a bunch of awesome special features, not like a company like Arrow or Vinegar Syndrome or Second Sight would be. Honestly, there's not really a whole lot here, and what is here is pretty surface level, archival, promotional, fluffy stuff, you know, that's really inconsequential to this release and not particularly interesting. You do get a few deleted scenes and an audio commentary here, but honestly, I think the special features on this are pretty weak, and most of them are not the type of thing that I would really even bother watching. I was just happy to have the film on 4K, so. Okay, let's talk about the packaging. Not much I can really say here. It has a slipcover. The one thing that is cool is you do get reversible cover art on the inside, which doesn't always happen with Kino. So you get this this standard Kino Lorber slipcover, which, you know, their slipcovers are pretty flimsy. You know, Kino Lorber's slipcovers aren't the best. They're on par with what you'd get from Scream Factory. But yeah, you know, the printing looks nice. You know, I like the blue. It looks all right. But for the most part, it's a standard Kino Lorber slipcover, so there's not a whole lot to it. I did like that they had this alternate art here and the reversible cover art on the inside. But pretty basic and flimsy stuff, not the best quality. That said, I do like having a slipcover wherever possible, so I'm glad I have it, but I'm certainly not going to give this high marks for the packaging over just a basic slipcover. So let's move on to my overall score. For this one, I give it a little lower. I give this one a 6 out of 10 overall. Now keep in my mind, anything above a 6 is usually a decent film. It's usually a decent release. And if it's above a 7, then it's a really good release, right? So I give this one a 6 out of 10. The way that breaks down, the packaging, I gave like a 5 out of 10 because, you know, it's just a basic slipcover. And then the image film and features, I give them a 7 out of 10, primarily because of the image quality. But overall, 6 out of 10 is my score for The Last Castle on 4K from Kino Lorber. By the way, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, do me a favor and please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do, don't forget to hit that notification bell as well so you can be alerted when I'm posting videos that you might be interested in. Also, don't forget to like the video. It really does help quite a bit with the algorithm on YouTube. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. All right, next up here we have the film Darkman from 1990, recently released by Scream Factory on 4K. This was a first-time watch for me, a blind buy. I had never seen this film before, but I'd heard really good things about this one. I'd just never seen it. And I ended up totally loving this film. This is a great release. Directed by the great Sam Raimi, who has such a unique and playful style, right? He's incredibly creative and inventive in the way he approaches filmmaking, and you know, this film is certainly no exception there. I mean, I kind of feel like this one has a lot of Raimi's trademarks kind of plastered all over it, right? It's just such a fun ride. You've got a couple powerhouse actors here for the leads, Liam Neeson and Frances McDormand. You can't go wrong with those two. Those are serious actors, right? And you've got a really fun genre mashup here as well, combining elements of action, horror, the live action superhero genre, and even a little bit of comedy thrown in there for good measure. I just found this film to be a thoroughly entertaining and enjoyable ride. All right, so let's talk about the image quality, the image presentation. This is a 4K restoration from the original camera negative. It was approved by Sam Raimi, so this actually looks the way Sam Raimi wants it to look, right? It does have Dolby Vision, and the aspect ratio is framed at 1.85 to 1. Really some stunning visuals here. The practical effects look just amazing. They really do. The makeup, the prosthetics and whatnot, lots of rich and crisp detail here that almost kind of glistens and shimmers with life when you're watching it. Lots of depth and vibrancy to the image as well. The colors really pop on this one and they just look amazing. This is really just a fantastic looking transfer that is probably the best out of the whole bunch that I'm talking about here today. Of all 4 films I'm talking about today, I think this one, in terms of image quality and image presentation, this one I think kind of stands above the other 3. So yeah, really good stuff. Now, it's true that some of the visual effects here might be kind of starting to show their age a little bit on 4K. You know, you do notice the green screen or the rear screen projections or whatnot. Lower resolution projections can become a little bit more apparent on a higher resolution format like 4K. So you just notice more of the flaws, I guess, if you could call them that. You know, part of that is just understanding that that's the nature of the technology they were using at the time, right? Before CGI really took hold. I mean, this was 1990, right? So they had to kind of do it the old school way. And the visual effects here, as a result, I think have a certain charm. I just love them. The practical effects look awesome. The way they put this together, the way Sam Raimi did this film, I think it just looks amazing, all things considered. And especially considering that we didn't have a lot of computer-generated animation at that time. I mean, this was before Jurassic Park, I believe, even. So it's pretty amazing what they were able to do, considering that we didn't have a lot of computer-generated animation at the time. So I think the old school visual effects, the old school approach to visual effects, I think they have a certain charm to them. I think they add a certain amount of charm to the film. But if you're a fan of the film, I don't think you're going to be disappointed in the image here. It really does look awesome. Now, admittedly, this was a blind buy, like I said. So, you know, I had never seen it before. I can't really compare it to previous releases on home media. but I have to assume it's probably the best it's ever looked in home media. There was certainly nothing wrong with this 4K release. You know, it had a great look to it. And part of that Scream Factory in general, they just do a great job with their restorations. You know, for as much crap as I sometimes give Scream Factory for other reasons, the restorations that they offer usually end up being pretty damn good and just look amazing. So Scream Factory really does do good work. Again, I never saw the previous Blu-ray of this, so I don't know how much of a leap in quality this is from the previous Blu-ray, but I can tell you it looked pretty damn amazing to my eyes, just, you know, seeing it for the first time. It looked like, yeah, that's a nice looking 4K. That's what I was saying to myself the whole time. So if you're a fan of the film, I definitely recommend picking it up for that reason. All right, and for the audio, same thing again. You get a 5.1 DTS HD master audio, no Dolby Atmos, and you get a 2.0 DTS HD master. So yeah, audio, you know, surround sound and 2-channel stereo. That's, you know, what we would expect, especially for something like this, an older film like this. As for the special features on this release, you do get quite a few little things, but there's nothing that's really that critical. There is no like making of documentary, at least not that I noticed. It's mostly, you know, interview clips, but you do get an interview with Liam Neeson. You do get an interview with Frances McDormand. You do get a couple commentary tracks. And there's some other stuff in there that, some other knickknacks in there to peruse as well in the special features. You know, I wasn't that blown away by the special features on this. There was nothing here that really stood out as a particularly excellent bonus feature or anything like that. I'm glad they're there, but this is not one that I would probably watch the special features for very often, right? I like documentaries, right? The longer the better. If it can be a feature-length documentary, that is like the gold standard for me. And when they don't have a documentary like that, when they just throw a bunch of like isolated standalone interviews, yeah, I don't usually bother with those too much unless there's something I'm wanting to learn more about the film specifically. For me personally, the special features were nothing to really write home about, but your own mileage may vary. Some of you out there may actually dig the features on this and might really get into watching all those individual interview segments. As for the packaging, not too much to say here. Just like with Kino Lorber, with Scream Factory, it's just a standard Scream Factory slip, although I do think I like the colors here. I like the art on this. I think it looks cool, but it's their standard, you know, flimsy Scream Factory slip. No reversible cover art on this, so keep that in mind. So yeah, I can't say too much about the packaging, but I'm just glad I did get a slipcover because, you know, I like slipcovers, even when they're cheap, flimsy ones like this. All right, for my overall score, I'm actually giving this one's kind of weird because I'm giving it an overall score that's slightly lower than Southern Comfort, but I think this one was actually a better looking restoration. So my overall score here is a 7.5 out of 10. So it's a good score. And the way that breaks down is the packaging, I actually give it like a 5, right? A 5 out of 10 on the packaging. But the image, film, and features, I would actually give it an 8.5 out of 10. So weighting it the way I do, for me, I decided, yeah, 7.5 sounds about right to me. So yeah, it's a great film. And it's, like I said, it's probably, of the whole bunch I'm talking about here today, this was the best image quality and restoration. Okay, and now for my final 4K takeaway of the day, I've got a 1984 classic for you, Footloose. New 4K just came out a few weeks ago. Now, I'll admit this film is a little bit outside of the genres I usually talk about on this channel. Usually I'm talking about action or horror or sci-fi films or other films that I consider to be somewhat adjacent to those genres, like some thrillers. But I'm also a Generation Xer, which means that I'm going to be drawn to the occasional slice of cheesy 80s nostalgia. And of course, I'd say Footloose certainly fits the bill. I used to watch this one quite a bit during the 80s. I seem to remember it playing on cable TV quite a bit in the years after its release. But prior to this 4K, I hadn't actually seen this movie in quite some time, other than the occasional clips. My wife is a big fan of this movie, and so she has watched it over the years, and sometimes I walk in the room and I might watch a couple scenes or something or notice her watching it. But I actually haven't seen this film myself, the whole thing, all the way through, for probably, I don't know, 20, 30 years. It's been a long time. I watched it a lot in the 80s and then didn't watch it a whole lot after that. Again, unless it happened to be on TV and my wife was watching it or something like that. Great cast, of course. Kevin Bacon, who I've always really liked. Laurie Singer, Sarah Jessica Parker, Chris Penn, and the great John Lithgow, who another actor I've always been a big fan of. He always does great work. And I was actually pretty excited to see this one coming to 4K. When I heard that it was coming to 4K, I was excited about it because I didn't own it in my collection. It's a nostalgic film from my childhood that I definitely wanted to have in my collection at some point. So I was pretty excited about this when I first heard it was coming out, until I actually saw the results. I've got to say, honestly, I've got mixed feelings about this 4K because it is not the significant improvement that I've come to expect with a lot of 4K releases, and certainly not as much of an improvement as I've seen myself with other titles. This 4K is a little disappointing, to be honest. So let's get into it. So talking about the image quality, the image presentation here, I'll just say up front, if you're going into this 4K expecting or hoping for a nice, clean, crisp, sharp image that really kind of transforms the film from what you previously remember seeing, that's not what you're going to get here with this release. There are some problems with this 4K. But I've got to say that I think many of the problems likely stem from attributes that are actually baked into the source materials, the way the film was made. From a technical filmmaking standpoint, this is not a great looking film. It's not a looker of a film by any stretch. At least I certainly don't think so. I think what's going on here is the higher resolution of the 4K format tends to reveal more of the film's inherent flaws at the source. There are a lot of shots on this film that look a little bit out of focus. They look slightly out of focus, or sometimes the characters look a little bit blurry. Or the shot has just a soft appearance overall. Sometimes there are these weird camera angles and zooming, and I don't know if it's the lens choices that they used or whatnot. The film has poor lighting in a lot of areas. It's just not a great looking film overall. If you ask me, it almost seems kind of like it was amateur hour on the set of Footloose. This is not a masterclass in filmmaking technique by any stretch of the imagination. And that's not me ripping on the actors or the writers. Really, it's not. Because, sure, we love the characters in this movie. We love the story, right? That's not the issue here. It's the aesthetics. The visual approach is just very, very lacking. The visual style and the aesthetics are lacking and pretty weak. But at the same time, I mean, let's be realistic, right? This is Footloose. And I don't think anyone goes into Footloose expecting, Stanley Kubrick or Christopher Nolan level filmmaking chops, right? That's not what this is. Now, keep in mind, this comes with both the new 4K disc and the old 2011 Blu-ray. So if you don't have either, you can actually compare the two right here. And that's exactly what I did. Overall, I would say the 4K image appeared to be softer, which kind of surprised me a little bit. But this 4K image came off as a little softer overall than what we see on Blu-ray. I thought the 4K image compared to the Blu-ray actually had more of a dull look, a more muted, subdued kind of look to it compared to the Blu-ray that's also included in here. I just feel like the 4K image here lacks the same level of depth and presence that we've come to expect from a good 4K transfer. The HDR and the wider color gamut don't even really feel like they're in play here that much. I mean, they are in play, you can tell, but not as much as I would expect, for a 4K release. Now, maybe it's just the settings I have my TV on or whatnot, but I honestly felt like the colors kind of popped a little bit more on the Blu-ray than they do on the 4K, which is not how that's supposed to work, right? Usually it's the 4K that delivers more of a wow factor when we're talking about colors, in part because of that HDR and the wider color gamut. But it doesn't really seem like they took advantage of the wider color gamut and HDR here in the best way that they could have for this release. I feel like this is one of those releases that it's really going to depend on the individual. Some people are going to like the 4K more. Some people are probably going to like the Blu-ray a little bit more. And you can even make the case that there are some shots on the Blu-ray that look better than the 4K, but yet on the 4K also has some shots on it that may look better than the Blu-ray. So it's a really hard release to evaluate because I couldn't quite tell for sure whether I liked the 4K more than the Blu-ray or not. I kept going back and forth on that. So I really think it's going to be up to you, your own personal preferences. I think this is one of those releases that's going to be a little bit more controversial and different for everyone. Some people will love what they get here on 4K. Some people will not dig it as much and will prefer the older 2011 Blu-ray. So if you don't already own this and you want to add it to your collection, I would recommend picking this up because one way or another, you're going to like either the Blu-ray or you're going to like the 4K. But if you get this one, you're covered either way. Regardless of whether you prefer the 4K or the Blu-ray, you'll have both. So you can decide for yourself which one you like, right? And it's a pretty reasonably priced 4K too. I think it was only around like $22, at least last time I checked on Amazon. Okay, and talking about the special features, there is a newer looking interview with Kevin Bacon on here. This has some fairly decent special features, but a lot of the best stuff is archival and older. Nothing, there isn't like a big long making of documentary, anything like that. There are some older making of things that are cut up into like 2 or 3 parts, but they're not very long. They're like 10, 15 minutes each or something, each segment. But this has a newer looking interview with Kevin Bacon on it, as well as a commentary track that Kevin's doing. And that's one thing I've always liked about Kevin Bacon. He seems like such a down-to-earth guy. He's always been such a good sport, you know, doing special features and stuff like that. You know, the Tremors release that Arrow put out. You know, I know he came back and did interviews for that release as well. There are a couple other interviews as well, but I think the best feature is the archival making of retrospective that was carried over from the old DVD, presumably. I believe it's in standard definition, and it's split up into like 2 or 3 parts. Well, it's part 1 and part 2, which I think are almost about a half hour combined. And then there's a third part where they talk about the music of the movie and they're interviewing Kenny Loggins, and that's worth watching as well. There are a few other little knickknacks in the bonus features as well, like Kevin Bacon's screen test for the film and whatnot. But there's nothing here that's really new, which, you know, that's to be expected with Paramount, right? I didn't expect a whole lot of new special features with this release. I just assumed it was going to be all the old archival ones that we got previously. And then, of course, there's the packaging, right? Which I actually like the slipcover on this release more than the previous 2 releases I just talked about. You know, with Darkman I talked about, and the Kino Lorber slips, you know, you get these little flimsy slipcovers that don't have a whole lot to them. Sometimes you get a little bit better slipcover from the major studios. And in this case, you can kind of see it's hard to see through the camera, but it actually has kind of a metallic sheen to it. This slipcover actually looks nicer, and it's maybe just a tad bit thicker than the Scream Factory slipcovers, but I actually like the slipcover on this. In hand, it looks really good. I would definitely consider it a nicer slipcover than what we usually get from Kino Lorber or Shout and Scream Factory. So yeah, the slipcover for this is pretty cool. But that's really the only thing of note about the packaging is this kind of metallic, foily looking slip. Okay, so let's get into the overall score here for Footloose. This one I'm giving a lower score to. I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10. And here's why. I actually give the packaging a 6 out of 10, but the image, the film, and features, I only give the image a 5 out of 10. So I split the difference, did 5.5 out of 10. I think that's an accurate score for this particular release. I have seen some other reviews, other people saying the 4K, you know, looks the best they've seen of this film. despite all the film's inherent problems at the source and the way the film was made. But I don't know that I really saw that or felt that way. When I was going back and forth, I genuinely couldn't decide whether I liked the old Blu-ray or the new 4K more. It was a hard decision. I mean, usually you go into 4K expecting a pretty significant improvement over Blu-ray, and when that doesn't happen, it's a little bit disappointing, right? Especially when it's not clear whether it's even better than the Blu-ray or not, and it really comes down to the individual's perspective, right? Your own mileage on this release is going to vary. That's what it really comes down to. Some people may love this, and some people may not dig it as much as they were hoping. Either way, though, I'm glad it's in the collection now. It's because it's a classic. Had to at least have it in the collection, right? So yeah, Footloose. Okay, so that about wraps it up for my first installment of 4K takeaways. I hope you enjoyed this little mini review of these titles. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I would love to hear your feedback on this new show, this new series I'm doing. Have you picked up any of the releases I've been talking about here today? And if so, what were your thoughts on them? And if you haven't picked them up, which ones are you interested in? I always love chatting with you guys, so make sure you leave some feedback down below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you soon.